every member of the mass democratic movement, emphasizing and requesting strictly the muting from that other side, because I can see, I still see people who are actually not muted, and the echo is coming straight into the vein. We will be starting with this important gathering. We will be proceeding with the big day, our 100 years celebration, the centenary. And while we'll be starting at this important occasion, we will actually start it appropriately. And we will immediately go to our international. We do have a young girl, a young comrade, who will also be dealing with that. If we can all rise, comrades, in order to observe the international, so that we can proceed with our centenary for today. Thank you very much, comrades. We will move immediately to our official, to the welcoming address that will be done by Moses Mabhida, Provincial Secretary. Comrade Themba Mthembu, I will allow this podium to you. Comrade Themba is the Provincial Secretary for Moses Mabhida, that is known as KZN. Comrade Themba.
Okay.
Can't hear you, Chair.
Unmute. Unmute. Unmute.
Yeah.
One, the horoscope. I think
Am I audible? The South African Communist Party General Secretary, Comrade B, demanded as a member of the Central Committee, Chairperson of the African National Congress, Comrade Ryder Mantashe, members of the National Committee of the African National Congress, first Deputy President of SADC, Comrade March, the Central Executive Committee, members of the SADC, the National Chairperson of the Young Communist League of South Africa, Comrade Abu the National Committee of the YCL, the Assistant Minister of International Development of the Communist Party of China, Central Committee Comrade Ming Xiao, Comrade Ambassador, the excellent Benedict, the son representing the Communist Party of Cuba, distinguished guests, and the revolutionary province. We are honored here to have a presence of representatives from the Jews and Martin and Austin, fellow South African people of the world joining us through social media. As the province of Mabhida in KwaZulu-Natal, we feel very honored have been chosen to host the historic 100th anniversary of the founding of the South African Communist Party, the SACP. I bring you revolutionary greetings and welcome from the entire South African Communist Party provincial leadership and membership of our organization here in KwaZulu-Natal. Today's celebration is indeed a superior occasion in the South African political landscape and strengthened to all the progressive forces because of the critical role that the party has played our country and continue to play in the lives of our people in South Africa. Holding the centenary celebration and at the venue named after our leader is a fitting honor and a recognition of the role and contribution played by the South African Communist Party leader who happened to hail from this province in building the South African Communist Party, which is today 100 years old. Our departed stalwarts of the struggle of our liberation and the working class, which brought about the democracy in our country, are surely priding themselves in their graves on this day and occasion. I'm talking about the liberation stalwarts who contributed immensely in building the South African Communist Party, such as Comrade Johannes Kofi, the first martyr of the South African Communist Party here in South Africa, Comrade Harry Kwala, the Lion of Midland, Comrade Moses Mabhida, Comrade Stalin Charlie, Comrade Mzala Numalo, Beline, Stephen Zamini, Kaymun Sami, Dorothy Nyembe, Gaf Dlovu, Kenik Dlovu, Linus Damini, Riot Makumani, Kwanazi Mamgopela, Comrade Siddharth, Comrade Smith Kwanyana, and many more who happen to hail from this province. The decision to hold the anniversary in KwaZulu-Natal is also seen as an honor of the working class struggles of historic magnitude, like the 1973 Durban strikes, and the inaugural launch of the biggest trade union federation in South Africa, COSATU, and many other heroic struggles. It is also with mixed feelings in that this celebration is taking place emerging from a dark cloud and a turbulent period of violent unrest in our province and Gauteng, in what was seen as targeted agitation, which exposed the sheer economic desperation of our people and our vulnerability of our state security in its ability to protect our democracy and our lives. While we thank the subsequent interventions that have since been made in the past few days, but the condition on the ground, which provided fertile ground for unrest, stays intact. In fact, they have worsened with the loss of lives, the loss of jobs, the disruptions in food value chains, the loss of local supermarkets, higher transport costs incurred when sourcing food, longer queues into supermarkets, which curtail the ability of people to secure prices and hikes in food prices. They are not scrapped to the surface. Unresolved national question of class, racism, inequality, gender, ethnicity, and its related chauvinism of all kinds. The Communist Party was the first organization to call for non-racial and non-sexist society, including black majority rule in South Africa. So this is a challenge that still remains with us. More than 27 years of democracy and 100 years since our formation. The recent of banning of private and public infrastructure allegedly sparked following our former president, Jacob Zuma incarceration, has had adverse impact on many families and the working class. Government reports indicate that up to 40,000 businesses were impacted during the widespread violence. As an organization that puts the interests of the poor, the working class, and the voiceless at the top of our program, the recent unrest cannot be condoned by anyone with progressive and revolutionary morality, since it carries features of counter-revolution. The extent of violence we saw being live on our national media platform formalized the nation and shocked some of us to the core. This was not only because of its magnitude, but because members of the party have in the past been involved in raising its concern through defiance. As you will recall, the Communist Party was the first to feel the repressive role of the apartheid state, leading to its unveiling in the 1950s. Therefore, it is not surprising to see its members being in the forefront, and it was not surprising to see its members being in the forefront and prominent among the first men and women to take up arms to defend our people when the People Liberation Army, Umkhonto weSizwe, were formed. When our members were not happy with the tyrannical policies of the apartheid regime, they took up arms and fought against it. It must be highlighted that ours was a disciplined armed struggle that avoided civilian targets, therefore could not burn down sources of food for the poor, destroy health facilities in rural areas like Nongoma and Ingwaku, destroy most means of the poor to take care of their daily lives. What we witness tend to define itself outside this legacy, the tradition, the character of our liberation struggle and fight for justice. When the South African Communist Party was formed in 1929, the world was emerging from the devastating World War I and influenza pandemic, which costed humanity millions of lives. It is unfortunate that 100 years later, we find humanity deep in another pandemic, the COVID-19, which has also already taken more than 4 million lives throughout the world and above 60,000 lives lost here in South Africa. In conclusion, I would like to share with you what we will be doing, which we launched in our provincial chapter to celebrate the centenary, which will be involved deepening the battle of ideas about the role of the party and socialism as the future, anchoring our celebration with centenary, with party activism and working class struggles, identifying and honoring our party stalwarts, identifying SSCP heritage with our provincial governments and municipalities, holding seminars, arranging role-playing, deepening research and debate, ensuring that the SSCP records and documents are collected, secured, and accessory stored. Comrades, ladies and gentlemen, my task was not to give the speech, but to welcome you to our beautiful province and to appreciate the SSCP's decision to hold the centenary celebration here in KwaZulu-Natal. So as we celebrate the 100 years of our existence and moving on into the next 100 years, we want to commit ourselves to the founding document of the Communist Manifesto, that we will continue being entrenching the struggle with our communities and also continue mobilizing our workers. That's why we say long live the SSCP and therefore repeat the call, I quote, let the ruling class tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose. They have well to win. Workmen of all countries unite. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrades Themba Mthembu, the Provincial Secretary for Moses Mabhida Province. Thanks a lot. That's a well-befitting welcome address, and we want to thank you very much for that. While we will be proceeding, may I, after acknowledging everyone who has joined all various platforms, may I make a special acknowledgement of the internationalists that have joined us as well. We are also joined by the Communist Party of China, that is also celebrating its centenary today as well, the same as us. It's a twin Communist Party in terms of the age, we're both having centenaries. The Communist Party of China will be represented by Comrade Li Mingxiang, who is the Assistant Minister of the International Department and who will be part of us for today. We also have the Communist Party of Cuba that will be represented by Ambassador Her Excellency Rodolfo Benez Verson. I need to acknowledge that I know that you are joined by a huge international community outside there. You are all acknowledged comrades, and we hope we will go through as well your messages as required from the program. And thank you very much for making time and ensuring that you are joining us today. Comrades, while I acknowledge earlier, let me just emphasize from the Alliance side, Comrade Gwede Mandasha will be representing the African National Congress. and Comrade Mike Shingange will be representing COSATU, the workers. And we also have the Young Communist League represented by Comrade Mbe. We will proceed with the program, just acknowledging and highlighting that the Communist Party of China is also acknowledged. And also we want to say to them, maybe centenary, the same as us. So I will just share with the comrades how the program will go for now. I'll just give some highlights. We will go to the Young Communist League of South Africa, and it will be followed by COSATU, Comrade Mike. We will then go to our international messages that will be delivered by the Communist Party of China. Comrade Lee will do that. We will also have the Communist Party of Cuba. Ambassador Lesson will do that. And then we will also go through the messages that have been sent from the international community, and we want to thank them. There are a number of messages very important for us. We will also go to that. And thereafter, we will then have our messages of support. The first one will be from the African National Congress, after the ones that I've already highlighted by Comrade Mandasha, and then we'll have the main message, our 14th centenary message that has been prepared, thanking the Special Central Committee of the 26th that prepared. It will be presented by our leader, Dr. Dayton Zemande. And that's how the program will be arranged. Of course, because we've got COVID rules and all, we may not necessarily do what it's seen as cutting off cakes and so on. We will be avoiding a number of other things, but we might tweak and change here and there to just fit the occasion. At this point in time, comrades, I will move and request Comrade Mabuse Mbe from the Young Communist League of South Africa, Comrade Mbe, and come and take the podium. Thank you very much.
Amandla.
Away to.
Amandla.
Long live South African Communist Party, long live.
Long live.
Happy birthday, South African Communist Party, happy birthday. Yeah, thank you very much, comrades. The leadership of South African Communist Party, led by the General Secretary, Dr. Nzimande, and the official of the party present, Comrade Moropa, Comrade Mapaila, the leadership of the COSATU, led by Deputy President, Comrade Shiganke, the hosting province, the Provincial Secretary, Comrade PS, and the rank and file of Young Communist League who are virtually attending on social media. The National Secretary in his absentia, who's not well, who was supposed to deliver the message on behalf of Young Communist League. Greeting to all the MDM structures. I forgot to mention the African National Congress, led by the veteran of the party, Comrade Mantashe. Yeah, Comrade, firstly, let's agree that we meet at the time when we celebrate the centenary, at the critical moment where the working class and the poor, their household are experiencing a problem of electricity crisis, of the price hike by the ESCOM. And National Energy Regulator is silent, more especially, and they took advantage that is winter and increased the price. where no one now is able to afford. As we celebrate centenary, we must take that into note. Firstly, due to the time that we live in, and in the pandemic the world faces today, the Young Communist League would like to pay a tribute to all workers across the world, as they are all play different roles in ensuring that we survive in this era. Those who lost their life as a result of this virus, this include, among others, Ndate Tsefotsula, Comrade Jackson Mutembu of late, in the art sector, Shona Fikazen. We also take this opportunity to wish South African Olympic team all the best as they represent our country with pride. Comrade Chair, today we celebrate centenary of our party, South African Communist Party, the only vanguard party of the working class in South Africa, and the first in African continent, most consistent. We celebrate the 100 fighting years of the revolution and solidarity, characterized by active campaigning, armed struggle, fight against post-1994 neoliberal policy. You remember Kia comrades, anti-state capture campaign that today resulted in many of the beneficiary launching fight back on our party. We are here to pay tribute on behalf of the children of mine workers, domestic workers, security guard, municipal workers, the health workers, teachers, the entire working class in South Africa. Being workers, ourselves being the unemployed youth and youth in education, we find our duty to honor this event of our party that over the years fought selflessly in the best interest of our struggle as young people. We are here to celebrate the party of Krisani, Moses Mabita, Alfred Nzula, Joe Slovo, Ruth First, Banting, Moses Kotani, Josim Bama, and many other great leaders and great revolutionaries of South African Communist Party. The Communist Party of South Africa, now South African Communist Party, following the banning of CPCA through the Suppression of Communism Act of 1950, by the racist apartheid regime of 1950, our party established in 1921, which has been formed by the Union of former International Socialist League, Social Democratic Federation of Cape Town, Communist Party of Cape Town, Jewish Socialist, and other many organizations that later were formed. Due to time and nature of the times in which we exist, we will not be able to express ourselves fully. However, we find a courage in that the centenary of the party is not one-day event. We have expressed ourselves on many issues before, on which we have no intention of repeating ourselves here. We are raising this because there are many issues that we still expect the party to pay critical attention to. Just to highlight few comrade leadership that we have highlighted at the 99th celebration of the past last year. We raised a concern that a deliberate mistake that occurred during Polokwane moment continue to haunt the Progressive Youth Alliance until today. The integration of POA component into ANC factions and alliance until today, the tradition of entrepreneurship to loot the state resources. Young people within the movement obey this tradition, hence the dilemma of the youth generation within Congress movement that continue to defend wrong things, and we must condemn that because they are beneficiaries of wrong tendencies. Equally, we also said that today the party is faced with both re-emergence of both the struggle that led to Polokwane and Nazareth. On other hand, the re-emergence of a demon of 1996 class project, and we know the location where it's located is located at Treasury. A leadership that seeks to be more powerful in the state than movement and against the culture of police perspective and tradition of the movement. We are just surprised when people are saying, this is not a decision of the ANC, it's the decision of the state, and then we are very shocked. And we want to highlight, we would like to apologize in advance for any inconvenience, Comrade TG, that we might cause as a result of our message here today. It's because of nature of us as a young community does not allow us to defy honesty and the truth, but always be objective in expressing our honest nature and the truth in its original form. We have decided to formulate our message around two documents, one being a very important document, which is a progress should be reviewed here today. The Founding Manifesto of Communist Party of South Africa, thereafter being the Communist Manifesto, which subscribed as a guiding manuscript and a critical tool of analysis. The Communist Manifesto that assert the need of consistently expanding the market in its product changes bourgeoisie over the entire surface of the globe. And we are saying this to analyze the recent developments in Treasury and in the country, how the wreaking havoc of our economic conditions. However, comrades, as we conclude our message, we simply say the party should urgently respond to overrated notion of the so-called fourth industrial revolution in the defense of the class, the capitalist class that once again developed a new scarecrow to try and eliminate working class as a primary motive force of production. In monopolizing, therefore, a new way of monopolizing and expanding the world class, the class divide. However, we cannot shy away that the national treasury and the certain elements in the ANC are total antithesis we stand for. And the party as we celebrate the centenary must reflect, according to decades, how it has achieved and sustained and overcome all these challenges that were faced today as an organization, and assist to build the African National Congress that will be capable of servicing the working class and the poor. We should, as I conclude the message of Young Communist League, we should also remember what the communists teach us, that the lower strata of the middle class, the small tradespeople, the shopkeepers, retired tradesmen, general, and the hands-craftsmen and peasant, all these sink gradually into proletariat, partly because of diminutive capital that does not suffice for the scale on which modern day industry swamp in the competition with large capitalists, and partly because their specialized skills is rendered worthless, and the party must defend this working class. In the interest of time, we wish the party a successful centenary, and we wish you well for the more years of consistency in defending the working class and the poor. Thank you very much. Amandla.
Without any waste of time, comrades, we're running slightly late. I will call Kosatu. Kosatu will be represented by the first deputy president, Comrade Mike Chingan. Comrade Mike.
Thank you very much, Comrade Program Director. On behalf of COSATU, we greet the leadership of the party present here, led by Dr. Blake, the General Secretary, all the officials, the National Chairperson of the ANC, our international guests, the Communist Party of China and of Cuba, the Young Communist League Chairperson. Thank you very much for your message. We support you, particularly on treasury. As COSATU, we want to reiterate that we have said before and we reiterate today that it's a remarkable period in the history of the working class, not just in our country, but throughout the continent and the world. The birth of the Communist Party on the African continent, the Communist Party of South Africa, remarkably changed our landscape and that of the then raging struggle against colonialism, against apartheid and feudalism throughout the continent. Once again, as COSATU, we owe it to the critical roles and the tools of the working class analysis against the struggle that the party bestowed on us in our quest to emancipate the working class and society in general. We recall the profound words of Karl Marx and Engels when they expressed in the Communist Manifesto that the history of all hitherto is existing society is the history of class struggle. In short, a struggle of an oppressed and oppressed standing on opposite sides, that each time it ended in a reconstruction of the society at large or in the total annihilation of the class that is contained. History has taught us that there's no class from the chair that can wage a struggle against another class. And in that context, we want to say to the Communist parties who celebrate the 100th years that the class that we have been guarding is under siege today. This has proven over and over again that without a class consciousness, workers and the social forces are unable to unpack and expose the class contradiction and the class interest behind every decision, behind every move, and behind every policy. Without that class analysis and class consciousness, we will not understand, Chairperson of the Young Communist League, what is behind the Treasury's policy positions, the Treasury's decisions, including Treasury's dictate, or even undermining the movement that deployed some of their leaders in Parliament. Towards that end, it is important that every revolutionary organization, particularly the South African Communist Party, should continue to play its role as it has always played over the 100 years to ideologically develop, train all its cadres in order for the struggle to be based on the theory of Marxism and Leninism. In the history of the South African Communist Party, we owe a special tribute to the role of the SSP in ideological and organizational and political sphere for offering its most sharpest analysis, insight, and advanced ideas during the most difficult period of the revolution, from narrow national chauvinism and tribalism to sexism, to patriarchy, to colonialism of a special type, and racial capitalism, including superstition, myths and stereotypes, and all sorts of backward ideas. The SSCP was at the forefront in clarifying the foundation of our class analysis and the advanced theory of the class. We have benefited from the history of works of Moses Kotane, J.B. Marx, Ray Alexandra, Dr. Yusuf Tadu, Jack Simon, Dorataman, amongst others. The Communist Party of South Africa laid a solid foundation in the development of the ANC's left-leaning orientation, together with the African liberation movements, towards clarity that the struggle against colonial dispensation is at the same time a struggle against imperialism and capitalism. So there's no struggle against racism, sexism, and oppression without at the same time to fight capitalism as a whole. We highlight, as we want to conclude, the significance of the role of the tripartite alliance and to be understood in the context above, that it is the alliance of the independent class formations, but who shares the common objective and the common struggle formed in the theory of the National Democratic Revolution. This is where the nuances, the postures, and overtures become more pronounced on either strategic or practical and tactical matters. This is very important for our shared understanding of the National Democratic Revolution in motion and how it shall be continuously evolving and throwing new and unprecedented challenges like we're facing today, the crisis of the economy, the crisis of the coronavirus, the crisis of the unemployment. And we've been engaged in the matters critical to workers and the working class in general as the alliance and its components, of course, in the recent past. We have experienced the difficulties of clarifying the National Democratic Revolution, what it means to workers, while workers are losing jobs, while workers are losing the protection of the CCMA, while workers are facing the onslaught of neoliberal restructuring of capital. Sometimes we have been at each other's extremes without seeing things the same way. The onslaught and the annihilation of the collective bargaining in this country are the current challenges that the working class, that the party is the vanguard of, is facing. COSATU pays special tribute to the role and the contribution of the Communist Party in building COSATU and working class power in general, with the result that the fundamental for our orientation in our character as a COSATU is that of Marxist-Leninism, and that is because of the work of the Communist Party. The ANC, what is it called? The left orientation, the disciplined force of the left, is largely owed to the role of the Communist Party. COSATU and the SACP are the key axis of the left in the alliance and critical forces of the NDR in driving the revolutionary and progressive movement as the whole. We want to take this as we acknowledge the journey of the SACP that has been very difficult, but also filled with rich experiences and lessons, to say as COSATU, use the 100 years to deliberate focus on heightening the ideological development, to intensify the building of the working class consciousness and advancing unity of the workers against neoliberalism and imperialism, particularly in this difficult period of outright capitalism, barbarism, extreme exploitation, and poverty. Point number two, we want to say to Communist Party, let's focus on building the Popular Front for Social and Economic Justice, bringing together the community and social justice movements coordinated by both the SACP and COSATU in the actual struggle against the ravaging crisis in communities and job losses. Dedicated focus on organizational development and building people's organs to strengthen our organizations, building organs of people's power, and reclaim the mass movement for revolutionary transformation, including fighting corruption, as well as abuse of public resources and parasitism. Being more decisive in fighting against gender-based violence, women and children abuse, crime, as well as in environmental justice to save the planet and the future of humanity from the path of capitalist greed. build more joint technical oversight, capacity to advance and monitor policy development, implementation, and evaluation in the state, so that we avoid, Comrade Mabuse, people saying it is me and me only who took this decision. It is not the movement, it is not anybody else. We must have that technical capacity to monitor, develop, and the implementation of our policies. Advancing a more robust internationalism and solidarity movement with special focus on Africa, on Cuba, on Palestine, Venezuela, and the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean. We wish the South African Communist Party 100 more years to come, and we're looking forward to all the activities that are going to unfold, that we're going to participate in it, and we're looking forward to benefit from the more robust, ideologically clarified, and decisive Communist Party of our South African working class. Long live the South African Communist Party, long live.
Long live. The message from COSATU comrades and the workers in the alliance, and thank you very much, First Deputy President. We appreciate the message. We'll move with speed, and now we will be on the international messages. The first international message that we will receive, it is from the Communist Party of China. Comrade Li Mingxiang will be delivering the message, and Comrade Li is the Assistant Minister of the International Department of the Central Committee of the CPC. Comrade Li, if you are ready, I will actually leave to you to take up this hybrid rally with a message. Thank you.
Your Honorable General Secretary Blade and Nzimendi, dear friends from political parties, I'm very happy to attend the SACP National Centenary Rally. First of all, on behalf of the Communist Party of China and the 95 million CPC members, I wish to express to the SACP our sincere congratulations on the centenary. And I wish to extend my warm greetings and best wishes to General Secretary and the 310,000 SACP members. Our two parties were born in the same month, same year. Over the past 100 years, we have forged strong brotherhood. In this year, our two parties have jointly hosted a series of events commemorating our centenary. We have sent congratulatory letters and conducted a lot of seminars. By reviewing our past 100 years of history and exchanging our experience and conducting mutual learning, we have further enhanced our understanding and friendship. Not long ago, General Secretary Nzimendi, despite the impact of COVID-19, has led the SACP leadership in attending the CPC and World Political Parties Summit. We are greatly touched. The SACP has had firm support on China on issues relating to Tibet, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and human rights. Recently, it openly opposes the politicization of origin tracing of the coronavirus. We appreciate the SACP for that. Comrades, friends, put people before profit. Socialism is the future. Build it now. This is the theme of the rally. This is also a vivid description of the past 100 years of history of the SACP. Over the past centenary, the SACP has been committed to seeking happiness for its people. During revolution, it has proposed the theory of the special form of colonialism and participated in the drafting of Freedom Charter. Its party members and officials have taken the lead, feared no sacrifice, and have provided organizational theoretical support to its democratic revolution. it has made historic contribution to abolishing apartheid and building a new South Africa. Since the establishment of the new South Africa, the SACP has leveraged its strength in government and has voiced for the vulnerable group through Red October movement. It has committed to building a unified, democratic, free and prosperous new South Africa, winning the sincere support from the people. Over the past 100 years, the SACP has been committed to pursuing socialism. Since day one, it has put socialism, a distinctive feature of its party, be it during the apartheid or the difficult times after the collapse of Soviet Union. It has never wavered its firm conviction to communism and socialism. Since the founding of the new South Africa, the SACP has relied on the working class through the coalition led by ANC, has added the elements of socialism to the South African society. It has made positive contribution to addressing the issue of inequality and improving people's livelihood. Over the past 100 years, the SSCP has been committed to improving party governance. It has built the party with the theory of Marxism and has maintained close bond with its people. In a multi-party system, it has explored the new path for developing a communist party. It has put its party's organization in where the people need it most. It has actively absorbing advanced members and values education, political education of the party members, and has kept the party advanced and purified. In this year, it has over 310,000 party members, becoming the biggest communist party in Africa and a Marxist political party with high caliber members with strict discipline and strong mind to fight. Comrades, friends, the CPC centenary is also a history about the CPC's work to pursue happiness for its people and pursue rejuvenation for the nation. Over the past 100 years, our party has led the Chinese people in overthrowing the imperialism, federalism, bureaucratic capitalism, and has built the People's Republic of China and has made important achievements in national independence and people's liberation. We have conducted a socialist revolution, eliminated the oppression and exploitation of federalism. We have advanced socialist development and have conducted social changes that are profound. We have made important achievements in socialist revolution. We have made sure the basic line of the primary stage of socialism and overcome all kinds of difficulties and challenges. We have upheld and developed socialism with Chinese characteristics. We have now become the world's largest, second largest economy. This is a historic breakthrough. This is also an achievement of reform and opening up and modernization. We have advanced five-sphere integrated plan and the four-pronged comprehensive strategy. We have been committed to modernizing our governance system and governance capacities. Historic achievements have made in all our undertakings of our party and our state. The Chinese nation has stood up, become rich, and is becoming stronger. This is all important achievements of the socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. The past 100 years of history told us that it is the people that creates the history. It is the foundation of our party. Our party has its roots, bloodline, and strength in the people. A political party, only when it put people's well-being and the priority can truly win the support of the people, can truly rally the people in creating history and remain in having the vitality. Comrades, friends, put people first and socialism is the future, build it now. This is the theme of the rally. It reflects the trend of the history and call of the people. Practice has proven that socialism has enormous superiority and strong vitality. There are more and more people believing in socialism. Socialism has a bright prospect, represent the direction of human society. For the people's well-being, the CPC is willing to work together with all progressive forces in the world, including the SACP, and grasp the trend of the history, answer the people's call, anchor the right direction, and shoulder our responsibility in seeking happiness for the people and seeking progress for all humanity. First, we should be committed to Marxism and be more convicted in socialism. Marxism is a theory about the liberation of all humanity and all proletariat. Our 100 years have shown that Marxism is the truth. Socialism hasn't and will not fail us. Facing the complex international situation, we need to work with all progressive forces and never be distracted by temporary problems and changes. We should be more convicted and committed to Marxism and socialism. We need to enhance mutual learning of socialist theory and practice, and deepen our understanding on the development law of socialism. We need to adapt the socialism to our nations and parties' realities, and use our practice and results to demonstrate to the people the superiority of socialism and make more people believe in socialism. Second, we need to advance with the time and apply the basic tenets of Marxism to our national conditions and explore a path that suits our national condition. The road to happiness is different. All people have the rights to choose the development mode and path. To realize people's aspirations for a better life, the key is to be based on our national condition and our national practice and find a path that suits our national condition. Whether our shoes fit, only we wear it can we know. All countries have their distinctive, different cultures and histories. We should not simply replicate other countries' experience. All countries' efforts to pursue a road to modernization based on their national conditions should be respected. Third, we should put people's interests first and strive to achieve the people's aspirations for a better life. To seek happiness for the people is the common goal of all progressive political parties. To achieve people's well-being, national rejuvenation is our shared responsibility. We need to act upon people-centered development philosophy and work to improve people's livelihood and improve people's well-being. We should enhance people's sense of fulfillment, sense of happiness, and security. We believe that people should be our source of development and development should be for the people. And all progressive political parties should be responsible to the people and to the humanity's future, connect the interests of its own people with that of the whole world, and let our development results benefit all peoples in a fairer manner so as to achieve mutual development and win-win outcomes. Fourth, we need to enhance party-to-party exchanges and cooperation, have more mutual learning, and provide strong impetus for human progress. For the well-being of the people, the CPC stands ready to consolidate traditional friendship with the SACP and deepen mutual learning on building of communist parties so as to advance our relations and friendship. Our party also stands ready to enhance exchanges with all friendly political parties and build consensus, have mutual respect and mutual learning, build a new type of international relations, and build a community with a shared future. Comrades, friends, a centenary is only a prelude. We have much more to expect in the future. We believe that by upholding high the banner of socialism and build it now, the SACP will have even more bountiful results in the practice and exploration of socialism in South Africa and achieve even more in the next 100 years. Once again, congratulations to the SACP on its centenary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Assistant Minister, for a very good message and also highlighting the significance of socialism and also putting people first. And we appreciate that, including the role that we've been playing together, the Communist Party of China working together with the South African Communist Party. We're still looking for a good working relation into the new centenary, as we'll be studying it. Without any waste of time, comrades, I will move on, thanking this good message. I will now go to the Communist Party of Cuba. The Communist Party of Cuba will be represented by Ambassador Excellency Rodolfo Benez. His Excellency Rodolfo Benez Verson, who will be delivering the international message for us. I will allow him, he's already on the platform. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Conrad. Dear Conrad Blade Simande, Secretary General of the South African Communist Party, leaders and members of the party, other participants from different organizations, dear comrades. The Cuban Communist Party received with great honor and appreciation the invitation to participate in this important celebration. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of the criminal and illegal blockade imposed by the United States government against Cuba for 62 years is that our country does not have access to the Zoom digital platform because that software is developed and controlled by a US company based in California. For that reason, it has not been possible for the leaders of the Cuban Communist Party to participate from Havana in this 100th anniversary celebration. Please accept our apologies for that. Our party has requested me, in my capacity as senior communist militant, to deliver the following solidarity message on behalf of the Central Committee of the Cuban Communist Party and his first secretary, Conrad Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, who is also the President of the Republic of Cuba. This is the message. Dear comrades from the South African Communist Party, on behalf of the Communist Party of Cuba and our people, we warmly congratulate the South African Communist Party on the great occasion of its 100th anniversary. Since its foundation, the party has played a leading role in the liberation struggle and the fight against the racist apartheid regime, always on the front line of the struggle for democracy and the construction of a non-racial society with social justice, for which many generations of its militants have been fighting heroically. We deeply thank the South African Communist Party for its permanent solidarity with Cuba and its valuable support on the difficult struggles that our people are fighting today against the imperialism offensive to defeat the Cuban Revolution. but we will prevail. Cuban communists, inspired by the legacy of Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro and the teachings of Army General Raúl Castro, ratified the commitment to strengthen our historical relations with the South African Communist Party. We look forward to continue consolidating and expanding our special ties of true friendship, solidarity, and cooperation with our brother South African Communist Party. Fraternal regards, Central Committee of the Communist Party of Cuba. End of message. Let me conclude, dear comrades, by reiterating on behalf of Cuba our congratulations and best wishes of success to the South African Communist Party in your first 100 years. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the Cuban Communist Party for always driving the message of humanity and teaching the world. Humanity is very critical. Despite all the challenges you have, you will survive. You survived before, and definitely no obstacle will actually refute Cuba. Thanks for the message. His Excellency Comrade Rodolfo Benitez Valson. Thanks very much. I will proceed quickly. We have our first Deputy General Secretary who is with us here. Comrade Solima Baila will come and give us the acknowledgement messages from the fraternal parties. Comrade Mabaila.
Amanda. Yeah, thank you very much, Comrade Joyce Muropa, our National Treasurer. Dr. Blades Zimanda, our General Secretary. Party officials, Comrade Senzeni Zokwana, our National Chairman. Comrade Chris Matlaku, our Deputy General Secretary, Second Deputy DGS. And Comrade Tulas Nesi, our Deputy National Chair, and members of our Central Committee who have joined us on this platform. And of course, our Provincial Secretary in KZN, the hosting province, albeit in a virtual platform, and all our militants of the Communist Party in the front line struggle against capitalist barbarism. Aluta continua. Comrade Gwede Mandashe, the National Chairperson of the African National Congress, and all ANC members who are on this platform and others, we say they must continue to strengthen and deepen and defend the National Democratic Revolution or perish to barbarism. Mike Shingange, the First Deputy President of COSATU, who has already spoken, thanks for the message. We appreciate the working class led by COSATU in the front line of worker struggles against capitalism. They must sharpen and deepen the class contradictions towards socialism. And to acknowledge as well the Communist Party of China, Comrade Li Minxian, Assistant Minister, who also spoke to us for an excellent speech, as well as to appreciate the Chinese ambassador in South Africa, Comrade Cheng Xiaodong, our dear comrades. The Communist Party of Cuba, represented here through the ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Rodolfo Benitez, our continued deep solidarity with the Cuban Revolution and against US imperialism that seeks to destroy that revolution. Comrade Mabuse Mpe, the National Chairperson of our Young Communist League, who has also spoken to us and all National Committee members of our Young Communist League and our Young Communist militants across the country. Indeed, we say as your slogan indicates, socialism in our lifetime, now or never. Comrades, we will not read messages that we have received. They will be available on our website. We just want to highlight key messages from our key parties in strategic regions. It's not every other region that we are reading the messages. They will be made available appropriately. Some are need to be translated properly. The first one is from the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, from Chairman Gennady Zyuganov. Deeply appreciated. This is a party that also played a central role in the development of our Communist Party from the days when it was the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. We have also a message from the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, and they've also given us a message here from the Communist Party of Chile. We appreciate that. In the southern part of Latin America or Southern America, from Venezuela, including from the ambassador here of Venezuelan ambassador in South Africa, Comrade Mayrin Moreno Merida. Thank you very much, and our continued solidarity with the Venezuelan and Bolivarian revolution and against US imperialism that also seeks to destroy that revolution. So US has become probably the greatest enemy towards humanity and justice today. It's seeking to destroy all forms of democratic institutions and governments across the world. It's a major threat to humanity. Message from the Communist Party of Portugal in Europe, appreciated, and also from our comrades in Britain. And Central Committee of Philippines also sent us a message, as well as, of course, the one read by Ambassador Rodolfo from the Communist Party of Cuba. From the Communist Party of Vietnam, as well, to acknowledge the Vietnamese ambassador here, Comrade His Excellency Nguyen Van Loy. We appreciate your presence here as well. And from the Communist Party of Zimbabwe, we appreciate the message. And from Communist Party of Sudan, Comrade Fatih Al-Fadol, deeply appreciated up there, very recent progress in the social justice as a consequence of revolution that the Communist Party played a major role in Sudan. From the PFDJ, that is the People's Front for Democracy and Justice in Eritrea, from Comrade Yamani, highly appreciated. A dear friend and special comrade, Comrade Yamani. Greetings to President Isaiah Afwerki. The great socialist revolution on the African continent in Eritrea. From the Workers' Party of Korea and Ambassador of Korea in South Africa, we appreciate the messages, as well as from our neighbors here, the Communist Party of Swaziland. And the others, like I indicated, will be reflected in our website as and when they stream along, in particular those that will require some translations. Thank you very much. Happy centenary SSCP. Amandla.
Thank you very much, our first Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Solima Baila. And those were the messages that we received from the international community. As the comrades will remember, ours is that of the international, it's that of the continent. It's not only national, but also broader than that. Comrades, we will be moving to the next messages of support. And the message of support we'll be receiving at this point in time is from the African National Congress. We are going to receive a message from the national chairperson, of course, he's also a member of the Central Committee, but at this point in time, he's leading the delegation of the African National Congress. National Chair, over to you.
Thank you very much, Program Director, National Treasurer, Joyce Mulobe Morupa, to the leader of the party, the General Secretary, Comrade Blade Nzimande, National Chairperson Senzeni Zokwana, First Deputy Secretary Solomon Paila, Second Deputy Secretary, Comrade Chris, Deputy Chairperson, Comrade Tulas, leadership of the party of COSATU, present here today, led by Comrade Mark Shingange, General Secretary of the YCL, who is not here, and the chairperson, national chairperson of the YCL, who represented the YCL, representative from the Communist Party of China, the CPC, and the representative from the Communist Party of Cuba, and other international guests present here, and everybody who have attended this rally today. Happy birthday to the Communist Party. Happy anniversary to the Communist Party. This is the longest standing ally of the ANC in the struggle for liberation of South Africa. And so it is correct to always remind ourselves of the Black Republic thesis as marking a concrete formation of that alliance, in appreciating that socialism cannot be built when the majority of the citizens are actually oppressed. So that has always been the anchor point of this alliance, and it's long-standing. This rally comes while we continue to grapple with the effects of the pandemic of COVID-19, especially the third wave that is with us now. Last week, we just resolved to ease some regulations so that the wheels of the economy are not brought to a standstill. The vaccination program is gaining momentum, and we hope to succeed and improve the current rate so that we achieve our desired goal of herd immunity. At least over 7 million South Africans, which is just over 10%, have actually been vaccinated. Opening the vaccine to economically active section of the population will improve the overall performance of the economy, and therefore live to our commitment to protecting lives and defending livelihoods. In recent period, in addition to the pandemic, we just experienced the worst devastation to the economy in two of our major provinces, which together host 50% of the African economy, KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. And I think one of the key lessons there is that the more we diversify the economic centers in South Africa, the better the country is. I think our comrades from China will tell us that when the growth in China in 1991 dropped to 4.3% and almost collapsed, all Deng Xiaoping ordered them to do was to open the West. And that triggered growth that translated to 14% growth. And that 14% growth almost led to economic overheat. And therefore, it tells us this crisis has actually instructed us to begin to open the economy to a number of provinces and not have the concentration that characterized the apartheid economy. This orchestrated looting can never be trivialized, and we should resist any temptation to do so. And whenever conditions of our people are used to orchestrate nefarious agendas, we should be able to stand up against such agendas. Therefore, the party has a responsibility to remind us theoretically that high levels of unemployment and poverty constitute an army, potential army for counter-revolution. Therefore, theorizing the base of the crisis is important for developing an informed response to the crisis. Therefore, the hosting of the centenary rally is also a demonstration of the resilience of our people and our movement, because in the midst of this lacking dark cloud, we find time and space to reflect on the journey of our revolution. These reflections inspire us to provide solutions to most pressing challenges of our times. Most importantly, the party has always immersed itself with ensuring that there's clarity in bringing upon fundamental change in the lives of our people. It is therefore not exaggeration when we state that we hereby celebrate an indelible effort in serving our people. We celebrate the contribution of many stalwarts of our revolution, the sacrifices and intellectual contribution of the likes of Whistle and Mini, Tabo Mfutanyane, Ruth First, Josimpama, J.B. Marks, Ray Alexander, Moses Kotane, Dorothy Nyembe, Chris Hani, Jack Simons, Joe Slovo, Dorota Mann, and many hallmarks of visionary leadership produced by the party. As we mentioned there, we should think of the collective contribution they have made and the generation that have made the Communist Party what it is today. Socialism is the future. We must build it now. We must actually begin to concretize that slogan, because if we don't, we'll be marking time. The SACP has endured many challenges in this course of 100 years. At inception, the party had to deal with lack of acceptability from our ANC in particular. I don't know if many of the communists remember that Josiah Gumede was kicked out as the president of the ANC because of his discovery of New Jerusalem by going to Belgium in the inaugural Congress of anti-imperialism and proceed to the Soviet Union, to Moscow, and came back and said he had seen the New Jerusalem. And that galvanized the right-wing flank of the ANC to kick him out of presidency. Now, the SACP has endured these challenges, and however, the ideological and theoretical fortitude enabled the party to survive hostility, build a stronger, coherent alliance. The role of the party in building the armed struggle that finally brought apartheid regime to its knees is no mean feat. In this sense, these 100 years were rewarding. 100 years of existence is almost a lifetime. However, the party has made look easier and has made the burden lighter. As an alliance partner, the SACP's contribution in refining the revolution understanding is unmatched. All ANC policies, if you read them carefully, have clear handprints of the party in terms of the theoretical content. Our collective experience in the trenches of liberation struggle have enriched our approach and understanding of unity. It is in this context that the Revolutionary Alliance remains relevant. But today, the call made by Deng Xiaoping is very relevant, that I quote, everyone to cast off the shackles that bind our spirit. We need to bring about a great emancipation in our way of thinking. I close quote. Failure to do so will reflect in anger when we engage. If we actually cast off the shackles that bind our spirit and begin to bring about great emancipation in our way of thinking, we'll appreciate that engagement is not a luxury, but a necessary effort whenever there are disagreements on any matter. Therefore, it is unavoidable that as we continue to forge this unity, we need to take stock of the new conditions. Accordingly, the unity and renewal also extends to the party. Some of these conditions include ANC being the government party through the collective effort of the party and the broader liberation movement. is ANC-led government. And the reason that is always described as that is because the presence of the party is not a by the way in that government. The party must make its contribution and be unapologetic for the role it must play. Persistent socio-economic challenges marked by high level unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The high levels of corruption that has consequently dented the image and prestige of the ANC. Improved matric pass rates that do not match entry to job opportunities. Alliance relations that continue to be strained by these socio-economic challenges, especially public sector and lack of support from the private sector. The party must help the whole movement achieve the stage of corruption and factionalism, being an exception, as are the case in the Communist Party of China. The challenges of today teach us never to take lessons of the past for granted. Therefore, we can only strive for excellence in our endeavors to serve humanity. And the lessons come from all over the world, especially revolutions of the Cubans and the Chinese people. And our proximity to the SACP has been very incisive, and hence the lessons are unending. I want to emphasize this by stating that actual experience is the only standard of judging truth. However, we are the first to accept that as long as our people remain unemployed, poor, and victim of all forms of inequality, the risk of undermining our democracy is inevitable. Therefore, the economic recovery and reconstruction plan should be responsive to these challenges in the immediate and long term. We should not lower our bar when it comes to radical transformation, transforming the economy. The starting point is to be principled, focused, and ensure meticulous execution, not sloganize radical economic transformation, but have a concrete formula that talks to changing the lives of our people. Part of the solution is to build a formidable alliance, which is to be responsive societal challenges, which is to be responsive to societal challenges. We are at a point where the reconfiguration of the alliance should improve these relations in order to function more effectively. The difficult issues should be confronted, but ultimately be resolved. The 100 years should put this alliance at a trajectory where service to our people is sacrosanct. And the SACP's experience of the last century are adequate train to many young people to search for truth from facts. There is every right for the party to look forward to the future with positive lenses. The party is in a better position to take bolder steps to strengthen the alliance. And the next 100 years should be decisive and in ensuring we tame all misfortunes that continue to bedevil our society of the world. Amanda.
Away too. Thank you very much, National Chairperson, Comrade Gwedemantashe. We really thank the message, and we have even noted sincerely not to lower the bar in the transforming of the economy. That's a very important message. We still have a long battle or a long road to change the lives of our people. Well said, National Chairperson. Thank you very much. Comrades, we are now moving to the most important part of our hybrid rally. We are actually getting into the South African Communist Party's centenary statement of the 14th Congress Central Committee. Thanks to the entire Central Committee that has joined in various media platforms that are here. we have actually delegated the leader of the Communist Party to lead us in terms of delivering our message of the 14th Congress Central Committee, which is the centenary message. Our leader, the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, Dr. Blayton Zimande, as delegated to do the task, will lead us in that. Thank you very much, Dr. Blayton Zimande.
Thank you very much, Comrade Joyce Moropa, our National Treasurer. I'll take off my cap in respect and honor to all the communists who came before us. Let me greet our National Chairperson, Comrade Zowana Senzeni. Comrade Solima Paida, our first Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Chris Matlaku, second Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Tulas Mercy, our Deputy National Chairperson. I have already greeted you, Comrade National Treasurer. It's our Program Director. Let me also greet all our members of the Central Committee and the leadership of the party at all levels, including our veterans who have joined us today. Comrade National Chairperson of the African National Congress, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, and of course, you're part of us, you are a member of our Central Committee and a distinguished one at that. Comrade Mike Shingange, the first Deputy President of COSATU, our hosting Provincial Secretary, Comrade Themba Mthembu of the Moses Mabhida Province, Comrade Li Mingxiang, the Assistant Minister of International Relations in the International Department of the Communist Party of China, His Excellency, the Cuban Ambassador, Comrade Rodolfo Benitez, Comrade Mabusa Mpe, the National Chair of our YCL, all the members of the Diplomatic Corps who have joined us, you are most welcome and you are recognized, and all the leaders of our broad democratic movement, the workers and the poor of our country, and comrades all. It is indeed a privilege to deliver the Central Committee statement on this important occasion, centenary founding anniversary of the SACP as the Communist Party of South Africa. Ubaba ugwalo usaphila, khona ivesi alithanda eBhayibhelini elelithi Mose, khumula iy'mbatata zakho ngoba lo mhlaba omikuwona umhlaba oyingcwele. Ukuba ukhona ngabe uthi asikhumule iy'mbatata zethu ngoba lo mhlaba esimi kuwona umhlaba kaMoses Kotane, umhlaba kaRay Alexander, umhlaba kaJoe Slovo, umhlaba kaChrisani, umhlaba wawonke amaqhawe namaqhawekazi amabovu ahambe ngaphambi kwethu. The formation of the Communist Party took place on the 30th of July 1921 at its founding conference, which was held in Cape Town from the 30th of July to the 1st of August 1921. What I'm presenting today is an abridged Central Committee statement prepared for delivery here. We will make both this abridged speech I'm going to give, and in the coming days, we are going to be releasing our full centenary statement, which is longer than what I'm going to say today. We are holding our centenary celebration in the midst of the current enemy, which is COVID-19. We want to use this occasion to say, as the South African Communist Party will continue being a reliable ally together with our alliance, as well as the people of South Africa in the fight against COVID-19. We have already joined that fight and we won't be found wanting. We want to use this opportunity also as the South African Communist Party to call on all our people to go and vaccinate. We want to say today on our anniversary, do not believe all the stories that are told about vaccines which are negative. It's not true. Every child that is born anywhere in the world, especially in our country, is vaccinated. There is nothing new about vaccinating. We are calling on our people to go all out to vaccinate as per the program of the Department of Health. As we mark 100 years of the Communist Party in South Africa, this cannot be an ordinary celebration. We say this because it is both a centenary and because also over the past few weeks, we have experienced an extremely dangerous moment with many warning signs to all who cherish democracy and peace in our country. We saw looting, vandalism, burning, and outright economic sabotage. We cannot commemorate 100 years of unbroken struggle as if these events of July 2021 had barely happened. All the time, thina samagomanisi sihlale sibhekene nezimo ezikhona ngaleso sikhathi. We are always facing problems that are arising at any time. And so as we mark 100 years of unbroken communist struggle in South Africa, let us ask, how did it come to this? What lessons can we draw from 100 years of communist struggle on the soil of South Africa? What legacy do we have that can help us both to understand and in practice respond to the challenges confronting us in the present? We must not be in denial of the challenges we face, but nor should we underestimate the most enduring contribution that the Communist Party in South Africa has made, both in theory and in practice. This decisive contribution has been the party's elaboration of the critical relationship between national oppression and capitalist class exploitation. Awukho umbutho odlula thina ekuchazeni nokuthi abantu bakithi baqonde ukuthi ukucindezelwa komuntu omnyama ngokwebala uxhumene kangakanani nendaba yokuxhashazwa emsebenzini njengabasebenzi. Ukuthi lezi zinto ezweni lakithi beze ama-twins ongeke uwahlukanise. Also, our contribution in elaborating between the relationship between racialized patriarchal oppression and the hyper-exploitation of Black labor, between the legacy of decades of white minority rule and the persisting subordination of our country as a crisis-ridden semi-periphery within an imperialist-dominated global system. Abaphelile labantu abasafuna siqhubeke siyizwana nje elitshelwa amazwi amakhulu omgqibo abashaya isicathulo emhlabeni wonke ukuthi kufanele iy'nkinga zethu siyixazulule kanjani. Thina samakomane sidala silwisana nalokho. This understanding of these critical interconnections has grounded our strategic perspective of a struggle for socialism as an integral part of a national democratic revolution. This strategic approach was the consequence of the early party's grounding in Marxism, its engagement with lessons from other struggles through the Communist International, and the organic struggle traditions of the people of Southern Africa. If the indigenous people of our country and those who were shipped here in chains as slaves from East Asia, from Madagascar, from Angola and elsewhere were victims, they were, however, never passive victims. Armed primary resistance was eventually defeated. Slave revolts were mercilessly crushed. But despite the often genocidal objectives of the colonial powers, this sustained resistance meant that when the 20th century dawned, the overwhelming majority of South Africa's inhabitants were not of European extraction, despite colonialism. This majority carried into the 20th century however battered, cultures, languages, and above all, traditions of collective resistance. The colonizers called this the native problem, the struggles of our people. It was a problem to them. To us as the South African Communist Party, from our earliest days, we understood this to be the potential motive force for freedom, democracy, and the abolition of class exploitation. It was this strategic perspective that led the Communist Party from the 1920s to pioneer the call for majority rule and full citizenship rights for all who live in South Africa, long before the ANC was to advance this approach, which was radical and ahead of its time. And it was this strategic perspective that led to communists at every key turning point of the ANC's history being in the forefront. We have been everywhere in all the struggles of this country. In the turn to a mass line in the 1950s and the adoption of the Freedom Charter, communists were there. The treason trial of 1956, the 1960s banning of the ANC and an enforced exile of most of its leadership. The launch of an armed struggle, communists were there. The elaboration of a people's war strategy in the midst of the rolling waves of semi-insurrectionary struggle through the late 1970s and 1980s, communists were there. Into a negotiated settlement, we were there. At every key moment, SACP cadres were present both as foot soldiers and as strategic leaders and organizers. On this centenary, let us reaffirm the critical responsibility of the Communist Party and its militants to defend, to rebuild, and consolidate a broad national liberation movement and a reconfigured alliance. We will not allow this broad liberation movement that communists in their tens of thousands helped to build now to be hijacked or stolen by criminals and demagogues. Ngeke sikuvume samakomanisi ukuthi lo mbutho wethu wenkululeko osuwakhe ngokuchitheka kwegazi elingako ukuthi webiwe amasela kanye nabanye abasebekhathele ukuthi siqhubeke nomzabalazo wokwenza impilo yabantu bakithi kube ngcono. Ngeke sivume ukuthi umzabalazo wethu untshontshwe yilabo sebefuna ukufida izisu zabo. Directly related to all of this is the second major pioneering and enduring contribution of the Communist Party in South Africa. That is non-racialism. Not just in theory. From the very beginning, the Communist Party was non-racial in practice. In fact, until the late 1940s and a short-lived Liberal Party, the Communist Party was the only political formation in South Africa with an active non-racial membership. Whites and blacks were equal members together in struggle. Through the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, this non-racial membership faced persecution, endured police detentions, prison terms, and together faced and fought back against the fascist thuggery of anti-communist grey shirts who sought to break up party meetings and anti-pass law protests. Black and white militants learned from each other and developed a lasting tradition of collective non-racial leadership. This approach to non-racialism was also evident in the communist-led formation of the Broad Front Federation of South African Women, which mobilized women across class and racial groups to stand firm in their masses in the face of apartheid pass laws and repression. This non-racial contribution in struggle of our Communist Party to our country is more relevant than ever. Ingakho singeke sivumele omafikizolo ukuthi baqale ukuthi bafune inhlanga ezahlukene sigconane sibe singekho isidingo salokho. Labo amafikizolo kwezepolitiki abazi ukuthi siphumaphi. Ingakho bekuthola kulula nje ukuthi asigconane ngokwebala. Akuyona into leyo okufanele ukuthi siyithathe kalula. Sizoyilwisa, soqhubeka nokuyilwisa samakomanisi ngoba silwela iSouth Africa ehlanganise wonke umuntu. As we are called upon now to combat counter-revolutionary forces seeking to gain populist support through ethnic mobilization, xenophobic agitation, through a narrow Africanism, through anti-minority rhetoric. The SACP's non-racial legacy was advanced by the Freedom Charter's clarion call that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. We still believe in that. To believe so does not mean we are not aware that we have to address the extreme forms of poverty and national oppression in the past of particularly the African majority. There is no contradiction in addressing the conditions of the majority of our people and building a non-racial society. In fact, addressing the needs of the overwhelming majority is a precondition to build a non-racial society. Let us defend this legacy of non-racialism with as much determination as ever before. These cornerstones of party strategy and practice have in turn laid the basis of the other major pioneering legacy contributions of the Communist Party. Through 100 years of communist struggle, our party cadres have been first in sacrifice. We number thousands of martyrs. Our first being Johannes Kosi as our provincial secretary of KZN said, who was brutally shot and killed in December 1930 in the struggles against past laws. Our late General Secretary, Comrade Chrisan, who was brutally and cowardly assassinated on the 10th of April 1993. And tragically, the roll call of party martyrs continues beyond the democratic breakthrough of April 1994, including Comrade Ubombe Mpumalanga. Esingazi namhlanje ukuthi wabulawa elwani kodwa siyazi ukuthi wayelwisa inkohlakalo. It is from the platform of this history, this 100-year legacy of theory and struggle, that we must approach our own immediate reality and situation, including the most recent events. In fact, what happened recently, this destruction we've seen, is part of a counter-revolutionary conspiracy. That's why we want to say, uma kukhona kulabo bantu abazabalaze silwisa amabhunu, abanalo ilungelo ukuthi ngoba nabazabalaza silwisa amabhunu, namhlanje abazobulala lo mbuso wethu wentando yeningi. Mangabe wawumholi wethu obalekile kuthatha waqhubeka izolo wawuyena. Mangabe usuthengisa namhlanje umthengisi, ngeke sithi ngoba wawuzabalaza izolo uyaqhubeka nokuzabalaza. Uma ufuna ukubulala le democracy elwelwa abantu bakithi namhlanje, umdayisi, umuntu okungafanele sikuthathe njengokuthi ulwela inhloso zabantu bakithi. Njengoba soyichaza le ndaba manje uma sihlaziya lezi zinto ezisanda ukwenzeka, lokushisa nokuzama ukuthi kucekelwe phansi impahla ngendlela okwenzekile. This insurrectionary violence and turmoil of early July was both planned and promised, sometimes brazenly by those behind it. It was at once well-funded, relatively professional, but hopelessly inept strategically. The plotters deliberately triggered and then lost control over a wave of mass looting, mostly by the most marginalized strata in our society. But shopping malls were not the prime target of the conspiracy itself. The real target was to cripple major transport arteries, and particularly the key South and Southern African N3 corridor, to block the Durban Harbour, to strangle Gauteng, and to take out electricity, oil pipelines, communications infrastructure, and the burning of food depots. There have been mixed messages and debates about the nature of the July events. Abanye omafika izolo bathi asingayibizi nge-insurrection then. Ufukela umbuso lo, insurrection, that's what it is. Were they a planned insurrection or the work of mafia-style criminal gangs or an opportunistic mass looting spree as if what happened did not involve all of these dimensions. It was part of all these dimensions. As the SICP, we believe that it is important to understand that the unfolding events had three general layers of participation. There was an inner conspiratorial core, which must be found, arrested, and charged and locked up. The signs point to the strong likelihood of the planning and triggering of the attempted uprising coming from renegades, past and perhaps even current elements in intelligence and related circles. It was from within this inner circle that key strategic targets appear to have been selected. It is notable that the first actions did not involve looting, but rather arson, ukshisa, and notably the destruction of some 40 trucks on the N3 to block this critical artery. Uma uvala N3 phakathi kweGoli neTheku, ayikho into sukufuna ukubulala umnotho wezwe lakithi. It is unlikely that the inner conspiratorial core would have been directly involved in these arson attacks, which followed the pattern of earlier criminal attacks on the N3. It is highly probable that the July truck and other arson attacks were carried out by the same or similar criminal elements associated with mafia-style so-called business forums seeking to muscle in on existing businesses. These criminal elements have been particularly active in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. All of this suggests that what we have long believed, that there are active connections between political counter-revolutionaries and criminal networks. Sisho njalo samakomanisi. Ngoba kufanele siyiqonde lento ukuthi kuhlangene ubugebengu la nosomapolitika abayizahluleki ekwenzeni yonke lento ngoba uma ngabe singayiqondi lento ngeke sikwazi ukuyilwisa. Finally, the third social layer involved in the events of July were those who participated in the anarchic spree of mass looting. The mass looting had no political or business agenda, and it was largely, but not exclusively, carried out by the marginalized poor. However, the mass looting was clearly fanned by a relatively professional social media capacity linked to renegade ANC and other networks, renegade elements in the ANC. No bad. Despite a compromised intelligence capacity, deliberately neutered by years of state capture, some of the most dangerous plans were forestalled by the security forces. But the vulnerable N3 was shut down for some 5 days using well-planned strategies that had been rehearsed earlier in the xenophobic attacks on non-South African truck drivers. The mass looting was actively encouraged to stretch the security forces, to create a smoke screen for the more hardcore insurrectionary objectives, and to try and win some popular sympathy. With a high crisis level of unemployment and poverty, with food insecurity a reality for millions of South Africans, it was possible to stir up opportunistic looting that had little to do with any political agenda, and with those doing the looting barely advancing any political demands in the cause of the plundering. Let yenzekile ukusetshenziswa kwabantu bakithi ngoba kwaziyo ukuthi balambile. Hayi ngoba benendaba abantu abenza lento benendaba nabantu bakithi abalambile. Abanendaba nabantu bakithi abalambile. Abanendaba nabantu abamnyama. Abanendaba nanosomabhizinisi babantu abamnyama. Ingabe into eningi eyishile njengoba bekushiso amabhizinisi osomabhizinisi abancane babantu abamnyama abanendaba nako konke lokho bafuna ukusebenzisa lento ngenhloso yokuzama ukuqhumba phansi lo mbuso wethu. Ngeke sikuvume lokho samakomanisi. Triggering this destructive plundering was bound to fail as a sustained strategy. As malls were gutted, as local corner shops were plundered, food and other necessities quickly ran out. Instead of winning popular sympathy for their political objectives, the insurrectionary plotters, who themselves had been involved in high-level globalized looting on an industrial scale for a decade and more, quickly found themselves on the back foot in the face of a massive and countrywide popular groundswell. Sicela ukubonga bonke abantu bakithi abasukume bama ngeenyawo bathi asizuvumela ukuthi kushiswe indawo esithenga kuzona nendawo esisizakala kuzona. Siyabonga bantu basemzansi ngoba ngalento beniyenza benivikela lelizwe lakithi kanye nale democracy esiyilwele kanzima. Workers in the trade union movement, Comrade Shinganga, understood that jobs were being lost, many of them permanently. The taxi industry, so these forces had no support from the trade union movement. We appreciate that. Abasebenzi balelizwe bathi asizihlanganisi nalobugebengu benu. The taxi industry, notwithstanding its own tendencies to volatility, understood its symbiotic relationship to shopping malls and played an active role in defending these commercial assets. Osomatekisi bakithi sithi siyabonga ngoba anivumanga ukuba ingxenye yalobugebengu. Informal workers trading in and around shopping centers were collateral victims. Traditional leaders spoke out and sought to dissociate themselves and their supporters from any ethnic mobilization, either for the Zuma-related political adventurism or for the looting. Religious formations condemned the mass looting and the attack on the rule of law. Above all, it was local community policing forums, neighborhood watches, community action networks that had sprung up in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and spontaneous volunteer groupings that protected neighborhoods and community assets. Ngiyayikhohlwa le comrade esathi uMasivakashile no Deputy National Chair Social Move, iyona eyayihamba phambili, was a cadre in the midst of the 1985 struggles against apartheid. He subsequently left the country to join MK. He was in the forefront of leading the struggles to defend and not for the malls to be destroyed in social movement. We say thank you to cadres like those. You are true revolutionaries. At times there was some race profiling and cases of lower middle class communities, black and white, excluding their more marginalized and formal settlement neighbors. In a few localities, there was ugly criminal vigilantism, like in Phoenix, in Durban. That vigilantism was carried out in the main by some criminals within the Indian community. It would be reckless of us to then go out and condemn the entirety of the Indian community, because that would be playing into fanning ethnic chauvinism against the Indian community. Much as we say in those Indian communities in Phoenix, root out those criminal elements who actually committed those dastardly acts. Working, of course, with the police. There is also a symbiotic relationship between one set of racist chauvinism and another. Of course, this does not excuse vigilante violence, and those responsible must face the full might of the law. The SACP salutes the role played, particularly in Phoenix, by the Young Communist League defending non-racialism, the rule of law, and our democratic constitution in a very challenging situation. But negative features were not the dominant reality of the nationwide response. Beyond the critical KZN Gauteng axis, the insurrection plotters failed to trigger an expansion of the mass looting to other provinces. Generally, ANC structures in all other provinces stood their ground, partly from principle and partly for their own regional reasons. In the case of pockets of the so-called RET sympathetic elements who might have been tempted to feign chaos in their provinces, the popular backlash against the looting in KZN and Gauteng would have been a definite damper. In Parliament, President Ramaphosa actively united all political parties but one. And in the Western Cape legislature, all political parties supported the defense of democracy, the constitution, and condemned the looting and violence. What were the objectives of the conspirators? Obviously, the immediate triggering of a presumably long-prepared action was the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma. The first objective was to prevent his going to jail, and when they were caught by surprise, they then attempted to secure his immediate release. It is indeed unfortunate that a leader like Jacob Zuma is behind bars, and no one is celebrating that. But the rule of law must be maintained. Caught out by the backlash against the mass looting, some in the conspiracy camp sought to backtrack. There were desperate contortions epitomized by one person calling on looters to, quote, please do so carefully and please do so responsibly, unquote. What kind of a call is that? A ridiculous plea which sought simultaneously to distance itself and to support such other similar calls, like an inflammatory quote as well, a posting, Moy River, we still see you, Amandla. One disgraced character ostensibly acting on behalf of MK veterans who had previously boasted they would never allow Zuma to go to jail, now vaingloriously delivered a 14-day ultimatum to President Ramaphosa to release Zuma or face some unspecified consequences. It was an indirect admission that this network of degenerates was behind the chaos in the first place. Now, if the release of Comrade Zuma became the immediate demand, the medium-term objectives by these plotters were and remain the displacement of the Ramaphosa-led ANC, and therefore of a Ramaphosa state presidency. Reversing progress being made within the ANC to clean itself up and to halt the slowly gathering momentum of the criminal justice system in dealing with state capture, crime, and corruption. Although this conspiracy has lost serious ground in the course of July, but of course at huge cost to our country and particularly to the working class and the poor, we must remain extremely vigilant and united in the defense of our democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law. But we must go beyond vigilance. We must ask how any of this was possible in the first place. How 27 years after the democratic breakthrough could this have happened? As South African communists, we say there are three interrelated factors. The degeneration in our own liberation movement, which we must confront. Secondly, a weakened state. And thirdly, the failure to use the 1994 democratic breakthrough as a platform to drive a serious national democratic revolution, with the resulting persisting crisis of extreme levels of poverty, inequality, unemployment, and chronic violence. We are not saying this as the SACP as spectators. We're also embarking on our own self-criticism because we have taken responsibility for this national democratic revolution. But it does not mean that we must not point out weaknesses that are there. The dangerous insurrectionary conspiracy emerged from its nesting place within the ANC itself. However, in saying this, we must be extremely clear about one thing. Much of the media present the conspirators as one ANC faction, the JZ faction, up against another, the CR faction. Zisho njalo izazi ezenzi izazi zaseMpumalanga zaseBhayibhelini. This plays directly into the hands of the conspirators to characterize the challenge this way, because that is how they seek to present their struggle. We reject this utterly simplistic characterization. The so-called JZ or self-styled RET grouping is really and largely networks of corrupt and opportunistic elements, themselves facing the prospect of jail time and relying on war chests accumulated through the looting of public resources. There is no serious political program uniting them beyond the threadbare ritualized incantation of unprocessed, empty and demagogic slogans. They are what one left-wing British politicians describe as resolutionaries, not revolutionaries. Those who wage factional battles over decorative slogans rammed demagogically through conferences, in preference to having a serious debate on policy options, strategy, and tactics. These forces have unfortunately so vulgarized the words radical economic transformation that although we do need economic transformation that is radical, it would be best to now find a different terminology. Seweyingcolisile nje le nto ye-radical economic transformation. Seyingcolile. Sithole elinye igama ngoba siyakholelwa ukuthi umnotho wakithi uyadinga ukuguqulwa ukuze abantu iningi labantu bakithi likwazi ukuzuza. Kodwa these resolutionaries have actually used this resolution to actually then empty the meaning of what this is supposed to be. As for the SICP, we are certainly not part of an RET faction. But nor are we in some alleged CR faction. We support the Ramaphosa-led leadership of the ANC in its defense of the rule of law, of our constitution, and in the effort to rebuild the ANC on a principled basis. Siyameseka umongameli kaKhongolose, uComrade uMatamela Cyril Ramaphosa, eholeni kwakhe uKhongolose ukuze uKhongolose ukwazi ukuyinuka amakhwapha nokuthi uzikline ube clean. Ukhiphe konke ukungcola osekuye wakhula wawukhula ngaphakathi embuthweni. Thina samakomanisi siyakweseka lokho ngoba sibe ingxenye njengoba sikhuluma 100 years namhlanje wokwakha loKhongolose. We support the ANC and the Ramaphosa leadership and work with it in the struggle to reconfigure the alliance as an effective force on the ground. But we reserve the right to be critical. And indeed, we are critical. Not as an act of irresponsibility, as part of taking responsibility, especially of the persisting timidity in breaking the shackles of a self-imposed neoliberal austerity, which in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and the mass destructions of lives and security effected by the failed insurrection of early July, this austerity deepens poverty, inequality, unemployment, and endangers community safety. The present problems within the ANC go back beyond the so-called 9 wasted years of the Zuma presidency. Since at least the early 2000s, successive ANC conferences have repeatedly noted with concern growing levels of internal corruption, money-based factionalism, gatekeeping, and general moral decline. Fakazi wethu omkhulu uye uComrade uGwede sinaye namhlanje. Ama-report wakhe omabili or 4 umasipala nama-NGC as Secretary General of the ANC were pointing to this degeneration that was beginning to take place in our own movement. But why has this degeneration occurred in the first place? To answer that, it is useful to understand the trajectory of events since the early 1990s. We are telling the history of our party, by the way, because we've been party to this. Our 1994 democratic breakthrough was powered by the sustained rolling waves of semi-insurrectionary struggles dating back to the re-emergence of radical trade unionism in the early 1970s, to the youth and student uprisings of 1976, and to the ongoing momentum of working class and popular struggle. Through the entire 1980s, and importantly into the very midst of the negotiations process of the early 1990s, these struggles were sustained. Our 1994 democratic breakthrough and our 1996 constitution were the outcomes of mass struggles, not elite deals. It's like this notion to say our transition was peaceful. Yes, it was relatively peaceful, but blood was spilled. A lot of blood was spilled for us to secure the 1994 democratic breakthrough. We dare not forget them. Ikakhulukazi sitshela omafika izolo laba abathanda ukukhuluma ngempi bebengayazi impi esiphuma kuyona ukuthi isho ukuthini abakwazi ukuchitheka kwegazi. In the course of these popular uprisings, the ANC and SACP underground regrouped and increasingly played leading roles. Pursuing a people's war strategy, MK units, comrades sold, and real MK units, we better say so today, integrated into the mass uprisings and reinforced the capacity of popular struggles to defend themselves in the face of the intensified terror unleashed by the apartheid regime and its tributaries. Not least in the very midst of the early 1990s negotiations process. Mina nje umuntu okhulele KZN kule yampi nakulola dlame olukahulumeni wobandlululo lwalubhekise kubantu bakithi sazi kahle iqhaza elabanjwa umkhonto wesizwe. Ukube umkhonto wesizwe wawungekho ngaba sikwazanga ukuvikela umgungundlovu namadolobha amaningi kuleya province yase KZN la ngikhulele khona. Nawo umkhonto esiwaziyo thina. Not umkhonto ozothi uyi-faction yomuntu othize. Umkhonto waziyo ukuthi umele ukulwela abantu bakithi. Without this MK presence and without the self-defense unit, the killing fields of the Natal Midlands, the East Rand and the Vaal Triangle would have been worse. Yes, out of those struggles, our own first Deputy General Secretary emerged, Comrade Usolo. Increasingly through the 1980s, basic organs of popular power emerged. The street committees, self-defense units, alternative education classes, people's courts, all implementing what the Freedom Charter had prefigured when it asserted that the people shall govern. What is more, we tend to forget, the Freedom Charter made it very clear that popular governance included not only one person, one vote representative democracy, important as it is, but also the Freedom Charter, to quote it, said, we also must build democratic organs of self-government. It's elements of these that defended us from this July insurrection. What has happened to all of these traditions and experiences? And what has gone wrong? To better understand our present reality, it is important to consider the various class strategies and agendas at play from the late 1980s and into the 1990s. We must never be shy to review our past performance critically. But equally, we must never imagine that in class struggle, we are playing a solo, that it is simply enough to wish for a favorable outcome for it to become reality. Equally, we must guard against the opposite of this. Guard against the defeatist evoking of the balance of forces that supposedly makes any serious struggle to roll back imperialism and capitalism futile. Within our own ranks of the movement, the balance of forces, my comrades. The balance of forces, we can't also be following that route. Yes, the balance of forces do care, but also through mass struggles, the balance of forces can be changed in favor of the people. That is how we defeated the apartheid regime, which had seemed invincible in the 1960s and the early 1970s. In the 1990s, imperialist forces did not stand by idly while the negotiated transition was underway here in South Africa. Institutions like the IMF and the notorious US headquartered Goldman Sachs were very active in their own way in our country. Throughout the early and mid-1990s, they actively recruited selected ANC personalities for training stints. Most of the leading ANC figures who went on to occupy senior positions in the South African Reserve Bank and National Treasury were graduates of these Washington and New York finishing schools. the consequences for our country, and especially for the working class and poor, have been dire. It's interesting that a great deal of fuss has been made about cadre deployment. What about this cadre deployment by neoliberals, the IMF and the World Bank? On the eve of our transition, they had targeted cadres to trade so that they could pursue a particular economic policy in a democratic South Africa, comrade man. What were cadre deployment? In the late 1980s and early 1990s, established South African monopoly capital shared the same general strategic perspective as the powerful countries of the North, the US and Europe. This was a period in which their global counterparts and corporate rivals were driving an accelerated wave of financialized globalization in pursuit of mega profits in low-wage economies. South African monopoly capital was largely cut out of this profit-maximizing globalization because it was constrained by apartheid. So South African monopoly capital in the 1980s, late 1980s, was desperate for a negotiated settlement so that they would see the removal of sanctions, and then also so that they could have the ability to disinvest at scale out of the country. By the way, your large monopoly companies disinvested from South Africa in the early 1990s. After they were free from sanctions, they disinvested. Many of them went and listed in the Johannesburg, in the New York and London stock exchanges. That is why, as the Communist Party, sometimes we say, our constitution, beautiful as it is, but it's an unfunded mandate because it doesn't have enough resources, particularly in the head of the state, to drive what we want to drive. As the prospects of an ANC electoral majority loomed, local monopoly capital was anxious to cultivate a new ANC-related political elite. It is important to remember that what is now known as Black Economic Empowerment, BEE, was in fact first actively pioneered by South African monopoly capital. It was the agenda of monopoly capital before it became official government policy. Among the first movers in this direction was Anglo-American. A third strategic agenda linked to the two above around the transition period was advanced by the political opposition to the ANC. These somewhat diverse political forces advocated strongly for a federal dispensation. They wanted almost semi-autonomous provinces. Their objective was clear: to water down the transformative impact of democratic majority rule in a post-apartheid South Africa and to consolidate ethnic enclaves. The Ngonyama Trust Act emerged within this context. Ngoba beyafuna uma sesithi celebrate 100 years, silikhuluma iqiniso. Kwakuyimizamo nje yabantu abathize ukuthi benze isiqiniseko sokuthi izakhiwo ezazikhona zikahulumeni wakwaZulu zingathinteki uma sekufika idemocracy. Yazalwa kanjalo iNgonyama Trust Act. Namhlanje sesiye sishwebelise nje sishonele nale ngoba phela sizama ukuthi kube nokusebenza ndawonye, kodwa iqiniso kufanele ukuthi silishwe. Although our democratic 1996 constitution upholds a unitary state, the shadow of federalism and ethnic Bantustan persists within our current provincial arrangements. The negative consequences of this were visible in the course of the July days, including within the ANC itself. These then were the active strategic agendas from the side of imperialism, South African monopoly capital, and the political opposition to the ANC at the beginning of the 1990s. From the side of the ANC-led alliance, thina besenzani-ke siyi-alliance uma ngabe oNgcobo bebezama ley'nto zabo nama-political parties abezama ley'nto zabo. On our side, we had our own reconstruction and development program, the RDP, which represented our immediate and medium-term transformation agenda, looking beyond the 1994 democratic elections. While the RDP might have been an uneven document, but it represented a strong programmatic commitment to major structural transformation of South Africa's political economy. Excuse me.
Cheers to our listeners.
And cheers to the RDP and the centenary of the SACP. The deepening divisions became even more apparent within our own ranks, by the way. Not long after the adoption of the RDP, not long after the 1994 democratic break, with the Treasury announcement of a self-imposed shock therapy in the name of GEAR, which to us was a neoliberal macroeconomic package in 1996. And this GEAR was imposed on allies, by the way. Comrade Mandela apologized for this imposition afterwards and said it was wrong to have imposed this. And it was a wrong policy, which was also unnecessary. We want to repeat that. That is why we say the problem does not start just with the Zuma presidency. There were problems prior to that. And there were things that we did as a movement, which we feel as the SACP we should not have done if we are to confront poverty, inequality, and unemployment in our country. A key adjunct of the GEAR strategy from the then dominant grouping within the ANC and government was also to actively use state resources and pressure to create a supposed standalone new black capitalist class, as if our revolution was mainly about a black capitalist class. GEAR plus elite BE were in effect the adoption of the neoliberal and elite-packed agenda of monopoly capital, but dressing it up now as official government and ANC policy. The active promotion of black capitalists, we're not saying we're not going to have black capitalists in South Africa, but it was not the primary goal of our revolution. The primary goal of our revolution was to change radically the circumstances of the majority of the people of our country, especially the workers and the poor. Now, the active promotion of this agenda was about transforming the class composition, the morality and orientation of the ANC movement, and to marginalize the working class and the poor. We need to assess the impact of this policy on our movement and to what extent it has also laid the foundation and the seeds for the degeneration inside of our own movement. We cannot understand the degeneration of the ANC in the later period of industrial scale looting of the state capture years without looking back to the mid-1990s and early 2000s. Where was the SACP in all of this? To understand the party's positioning at, for instance, the 2007 ANC National Conference, it is important to understand the preceding years. By the way, even this economic policy of the ANC prior to 2007, from 1996, created tensions inside the ANC itself. And those tensions reached a particular crescendo at the 2007 Bulugwane Conference. Those who felt left out felt that it was their time to eat. From the early 1990s, there was a very deliberate attempt from within leading quarters of the ANC to marginalize and perhaps even liquidate the SACP. Comrade Matasha, this did not end, unfortunately, with Josiah Kumende. There were elements of this in the early 1990s to try and marginalize the SACP. We're not complaining. We are merely telling this history for what it is. Long before the Zuma presidency, state resources, including intelligence resources, were deployed against the SACP. We know that. And we've raised this. This was at the national level. In provinces also, the abusive relationship directed at the party comrades was often more extreme. Faced with this offensive from the mid-1990s, the SACP deliberately embarked on two major endeavors. The one was strategic and the second was organizational. Let me focus on the organizational take. The strategic one, by the way, was to adopt the programmatic slogan of socialism is the future, build it now. We adopted this in 1995, not out of an accident, because we understood it, as we are going to say later, that The path of the National Democratic Revolution can only succeed if it has got a socialist type orientation. We want to repeat that. The NDR can only succeed if it's got a socialist type orientation, not a capitalist type orientation, not in a country like South Africa. That was our first response. The second response was organizational. On the organizational and campaigning front, we quickly realized that party marginalization, if not liquidation, would be easy if we failed to build a relatively large party. As we mark our centenary, we have certainly achieved an unprecedented mass scale with over 300,000 members. The extent to which we have effectively built a significant cadreship within this membership is a challenge which we readily acknowledge. We criticize ourselves in our 100 years. We have hugely increased our membership, but we have not built enough layer of cadres inside the SACP. That's our own self-criticism. We also appreciated that it was not just a question of membership size, but that the party needed to be an active campaigning SACP. Accordingly, we launched our highly impactful Red October campaign in 1999 with strong socialist and anti-capitalist messaging and mobilization. As a matter of fact, our campaigning activism, especially the Red October campaign, contributed enormously to the massive growth of the SACP over the last 20 years or so. Through the 1990s, we also appreciated the key importance of cementing what we call the left axis, the SACP and COSATU, while not abandoning active participation within the ANC itself. We worked hard to cement our relationship with COSATU as the left axis. And this relationship still requires to be deepened, but it's not an anti-ANC axis. In fact, it can act as a motive force to strengthen the African National Congress itself. This left axis became particularly important in the struggles against privatization of key state resources in the wake of the adoption of GEAR. It was also critical in sustaining the struggle from within the ANC-led alliance itself against what amounted to a genocidal AIDS denialism of the mid to the late 1990s. And early 2000s, actually, early 2000s. This was the context in which the SACP engaged with the ANC's 2007 Polokwane National Conference. Along with COSATU, we were under no illusions that one part of those who emerged in Polokwane were populist, primitive accumulators who believed it was now their turn to eat. They saw themselves as the walking wounded. Some were from provinces where much of early state capture was pioneered and who now aspire to carry their endeavors to the national stage. We cannot allow responsibility for selling oneself to the highest bidder, for the multi-billion looting of public resources, for eroding the democratic sovereignty of our country, to be obscured by presenting oneself as a sorry victim of supposed conspiracies. This thing of some people seeing themselves as victims is a problem. Or presenting themselves as victims is a problem. We have never presented ourselves like that in our struggle, by the way, historically. Even as the oppressed Black majority never presented itself as victims, much as they were being victimized, seriously so by apartheid. Against the recent sad attempts at drumming up populist sympathy, we must forever uphold the example of Comrade Chris Hani, who was the target of numerous real, not imaginary assassination attempts, and the real victim of the ultimate victimization. And yet, Comrade Hani never ever presented himself, nor would he want us to remember him now as primarily a victim. Angavuka kwavutsho nyana. Uma ngabe sithi wabayi victim nje, yes, wabayi victim wabulawa, but he never carried himself as a victim, as if there were hundreds of conspiracies coming from all over the place towards him. Participation, however heroic or otherwise, in a collective struggle in the recent past is not a license or coupon to be reclaimed against history for personal benefit. Ukuthi wazi abalazi akusho ukuthi lokho yi-license yokuthi ke namhlanje mase sikufaka esikhundleni yeba. There's also this story of the 9 wasted years, which as part of telling our 100-year history, we need to say something about. As we look back on the period that followed the 2007 Polokwane Conference and the 2009 inauguration of Zuma as the president, it is important that we reject, or at the very least, nuance the now common 9 wasted years narrative. There were wasted years also before 2009, as we have argued. And after 2009, not everything was a waste. This is not remotely to deny the huge escalation of corruption and looting of public resources that assumed an industrial scale after 2009. But there were also some immediate advances that were made in the wake of Polokwane in 2009. The most notable was the rolling out of the largest antiretroviral program in the world. That was a huge achievement of the early Zuma presidency. Within a matter of years, life expectancy showed significant increases. In 2011, as the left, we succeeded in getting a presidential infrastructure coordinating commission established. We argued for this together with COSATU, with the objective of overcoming departmental silos and driving strategic integrated projects. In higher education, there was massive growth of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, and there was expansion in the TVET college sector, and a huge increase in the number of students in higher education. Reindustrialization was boosted and consolidated through the IPAP, the Industrial Policy Action Plan programs. Our trade strategy was toughened up as we moved away from the earlier hyperliberalization and unfavorable binational agreements. These were not wastes. It was progress. For us as the left, this was progress on behalf of the people of this country. The extended public works programs were scaled up with an emphasis on sustainable livelihoods rather than the tendency to regard these as simply short-term, temporary ladders into largely non-existent formal waged work. In other sectors like communication and broadcasting, SACP members serving as ANC ministers bravely fought against corporate capture and monopoly capital's pillaging of the public broadcaster until they were unceremoniously dumped as ministers. Comrade Eunice Karimu, who was our minister, one of the best ministers of communication this country has had, tried to fight against the theft of SABC property by the private sector linked to Naspers. That's why we are not friends of Naspers. Naspers never covers us positively because we were fighting against the theft. How can popular, I don't know whether that's a soap like stew, good is nice. It's no longer owned by the SAPC. It's owned by DSTV and Naspers. And we demand in our centenary, let those products of the SAPC be brought back as buye into the South Africa. But also not comrade to Eunice, there's early stages of state capture. But in varying degrees, all of these potentially transformative advances eventually suffered, we want to agree, under the double whammy of a persisting neoliberal macroeconomic straitjacket on the one hand and predatory looting on the other. These advances were soon rolled back by state capture. Deprived of budgetary support, both the industrialization drive and public employment programs could never go to sufficient scale. Early successes in driving a major strategically integrated infrastructure build program was killed by the weakening of the state-owned enterprises like Eskom, Transnet, and PRASA. kulama state-owned enterprises, inkampani zethu zikahulumeni, kwebiwe ngathi kusasa lisekho. Kwabulala zonke lezi zinto esasithi ziza kahle emva kwa-2009. There are lessons for us all, including, of course, the SACP, to draw from this experience. We are not saying we are angels as the South African Communist Party. Not at all. We have made our own mistakes and we'll own up to those. But we must continue to self-introspect. What is undeniable, however, is that from at least 2016, it was the SACP, along with some courageous ANC whistleblowers, that was in the forefront from within the ANC alliance of the struggle against state capture. We are proud of that. Now, having said all this, trying to tell the history of the party within this context, what is to be done? What now are the tasks confronting the SACP in the interlocking struggles to rebuild a national popular movement, to advance, deepen, and defend the national democratic revolution, and to advance socialism? So, my command is, by the way, we must defend the ANC. The ANC is us. We must defend the ANC from those who want to steal it for their own personal processes. That's why we said we support President Ramaphosa to try and renew. Comrade Gwet, we want to say, yes, of course, ourselves as the SACP, we want to be part of that renewal. Part of renewing ourselves as the SACP is to increase the number of cadres within our own ranks. The alliance as a whole must renew. We accept that challenge. Capitalism survives, by the way, not because it is not constantly immersed in crises of its own making, but because it has the capacity to turn its own crisis into the crisis for the popular masses and for the sustainability of our environment. The crisis of capitalism weighed down on working class and poor communities as layoffs and long-enduring mass unemployment ravage communities. The daily lives of the working class and poor are burdened by dysfunctional public transport that consume 1/3 of household earnings, by food insecurity, by the lack of even basic community safety, especially affecting women and children, by a mood of deep alienation among youth with no sense of any future. Gender-based violence is one manifestation of how the crisis of capitalism is weighing on families and relationships. Gender-based violence and femicide, which we must fight by all means we have, is a particular manifestation of what in our language we have called the crisis of social reproduction. The idea that the worst things are for the working class and the poor, the better for the revolution, is a terrible fallacy. Asikwazi ukuzabalazela ukuthi iranda liwe sithi abantu abalambe ngokuma belamba ngoba abantu abalambile bangavuka kwesinye isikhathi uthola ukuthi basetshenziswa ngendlela ezingalungile njengoba sibonile manje ngoJuly abasetshenziswanga ukuthi abantu bakithi izinto ziye phambili esikhundleni saloko isiphindisele emuva. That is why advancing, deepening and defending the national democratic revolution and building capacity for socialism must in the first place be about building social capacity, social resilience, and sustainable livelihoods. We need to note the desperate scramble to take up the pitifully small and temporary 350 rand special COVID-19 grant, which now has been reintroduced. It has been brought back. We welcome this because as the SACP, we have campaigned for the continuation of this grant, not as a solution to everything, but we think it lays a basis, Mongameli Kosatu, for the basic income grant, which we want. As part of the minimum income guarantee. Public employment programs is one thing that as the SACP, we are of the view they must be made a priority. Let's illustrate this. There are millions of unemployed South Africans, but who are willing and able to work. And there are vast areas of socially needed work in our country, in our society, in our communities. What are some of these? We need more childcare. We need more township infrastructure maintenance. We need more sports coaching in townships and rural schools. We need more community healthcare workers. We need more community-safe workers. We need more shelter care for abused women and for people to work there. We need more community food gardens. We need more of building environmental resilience. All these places can be tackled by increasing public employment. That's our message in this centenary. One of our way out of poverty, inequality, and unemployment is for our government to lead a huge public employment program to absorb our unemployed and especially the youth that is unemployed. We are part of this. We are not saying this on the sidelines. We are part of government. We are part of the state as communists. And we feel we are saying this because we are part also of that responsibility. This requires decisive expansion of public employment programs, as we say. The profits before people capitalist labor market is not remotely capable or willing to address this huge challenge. Advancing, deepening, and defending a second, more radical phase of our democratic transition, the national democratic revolution, has become more urgent in the face of COVID-19 pandemic, which is worsening the pre-existing high levels of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. As the SACP, we've driven a lot of campaigns to try and deal with the situation that faces us. For instance, it's crucial to intensify our financial sector transformation campaign, not only to make banks and other financial services institutions to serve our people, but as a key national transformation and development imperative to build developmental state and cooperative banking sectors. We must demonopolize and diversify ownership participation in the financial sector. How big is amabhanga kithi ukuthi ahluleka kanjani? Uhulumeni unawo 200 billion ukuthi niyolekelela osomabhizinisi abancane. Ayisebenzanga iningi lale mali. Ngoba amabhanga awakwazi ukusebenza nosomabhizinisi abancane. Ingakho sithi sifuna nezinye inhlobo zamabhanga, amabhanga abantu nama-cooperative banks azokwazi ukusiza abantu abayizamelayo eceleni. Lo mkhankaso sowuqhuba samakomanisi. Sithi abantu baseNingizimu Afrika mabasijoyine nama-allies ethu ukuthi siwuqhube lo mkhankaso ukuthi kushintshwe indlela yokuthi kube namabhange ambalwa ayikhondla-khondla kodwa angakwazi ukubenzela lutho abantu bakithi. We must resolutely continue pushing constitutional and legislative development and other executive measures and popular mobilization for the state to speed up land redistribution to enable South Africans to gain access to land on an equitable basis. We need not even wait for the change of the constitution, by the way. We believe that the current constitution gives us as government enough powers to be able to drive land redistribution in our country. Let's push for that. The campaign to achieve access to water and sanitation for all is as crucial as ever. As public servants, by the way, also continue to engage the government on the social wage. In support of the engagement that is going on, the SACP calls for an establishment of an affordable housing program, healthcare program, and education program, Comrade Shingange, to assist the children of public servants to get higher education, for instance. Le mpesheni zenu zakahulumeni azikakasetshenziswa ngendlela eyiyona engakwazi ukuthi isize abasebenzi bakahulumeni bakwazi ukuthola imizi, bakwazi ukuthi babe ne-medical scheme abazoyi-afforda, bakwazi ukuthola i-assistance ukuthi bafundise iy'ngane zabo ema-university nasemakolleji. Ingenzeka leyo. It's possible. Because if you also look at the government pensions, there are many middlemen, and it's often men, who are just screaming through sometimes dubious investments, when in fact, part of that money, without losing it, can be invested to provide a cushion and a social wage to public sector workers in this country. In focusing on the building of sustainable livelihoods, much greater attention needs to be paid to the solidarity economy, to supporting cooperatives and to workers in the informal sector. We want to say, so far, our government support for cooperative is welcome. But the problem, we have not realized the set-asides for cooperatives. If you don't set aside particular work, whether it's cleaning townships or whatever, and say, or for that matter, the school feeding scheme being set aside for cooperatives. If you don't do that, you won't build cooperatives. You won't build cooperatives. Good deployment yami ke bese ngihamba ke comrade Mike nawe comrade Zulu. Yo train ama co-ops. Angenamsebenzi. Ukuthi imali iphathwa kanjani. Kodwa akho ngisho isente ephoketheni. Umtshela kanjani umuntu ukuthi uyiphatha kanjani imali? Kungekho ngisho isente ephoketheni. Hambe yobadlalisa imonopoly uma ufuna ukubafundisa ukuphathwa kwesente. Lo mdlalo okuthiwa imonopoly. So this thing of set asides for small business and for cooperatives is something that as we start our next century, we must begin to fight for. Also, as the SACP, we are saying, the developmental capacity of our public institutions have been seriously weakened by both state capture and by mindless self-imposed and self-destructive austerity. In the midst of the early July mass looting that we spoke about, the Business Day, the newspaper, suddenly cried loudest about the fact that South Africa now had fewer police than we did 10 years ago, while there were 8 million more South Africans. But just the week before, the very same Business Day is praising budget cuts by government. You're on a Business Day. Amaphoyisa engasanele sekuyibo abakhala kuqala futhi kanti umthethweni lento yokuba iphephandaba longo kusho ukuthi anikwazi ukubona izinto ukuthi into eyenza ukuthi amaphoyisa angeneli is because of these budget cuts and its supporters of YouTube. We're not saying government is not under pressure financially. In fact, as the SACP we have said, it's not sustainable to be demanding services from a government that is unable to collect enough taxes because the productive sector of the economy is narrow. We understand that as the SACP. There is a limit to which you can push government. But at the same time, you can't just be having just a generalized budget cut on everything in the same way as if we have no priorities. We have called for this in the alliance. Let's agree on our priorities and then say, if we are under fiscal pressure, where do we cut, but also where do we increase in order to turn our economy around? Billions of rands of damage are incurred, and all because we think we are saving money. Of course, we can't throw money at dysfunctional institutions, but at the same time, we have to have priorities, as we say. Developing state capacity must also involve rebuilding the capacity of the state, including the state-owned enterprises, so that they are able to drive a major state-led infrastructure build program. China has managed to do what it has done because of what it did with the state-owned enterprises. Today, it's interesting, even Biden is saying we need a different model. That's why Biden is putting in so much money into infrastructure and to everything. He's feeling the pressure of the successes of the Chinese government in using its state-owned enterprises to lead a huge economic development effort. We do have, our own state-owned enterprises do have that capacity, and we must still focus on rebuilding that capacity. One aspect of the struggle of state capacity, of course, is to build our own national sovereignty. That's why we welcome the struggle led by President Ramaphosa against vaccine imperialism. But there is much more to the struggle to consolidate democratic national sovereignty, including the critical struggle to avoid dollar-denominated debt enslavement to the IMF. Our state financial institutions, including regulatory institutions and the Reserve Bank, are frequently paraded as models of perfection and bastions against state capture. Where they have played a role against state capture, we salute them. And yet there's been a massive failure in these quarters to curb huge financial outflows out of our economy. We are still concerned that the Reserve Bank has got much capacity and much more bigger role to play in the economic crisis that we actually have. We have always said it can't just be chasing the inflation target. The Reserve Bank must also chase the employment target at the same time. These are the things that in the alliance. And I'm not making my comrades just tell you, shh, usukhuluma nge-Reserve Bank. Kanjani? Ibhange labantu, ibhange lethu, soyekela nokukhuluma ukuthi sibone ukuthi kufanele ukuthi lenze njani. Now, building state capacity must also mean capacity to discipline and direct private capital. That is why, as the SACP, we're going back to what we've called prescribed assets. Let's direct certain monies in the hands of the private sector into priority investments, especially into the productive sector of our economy. On this solemn, as I move towards closing, on this solemn but celebratory occasion of the SACP's centenary, we affirm what we have affirmed before. The struggle for socialism in South Africa and the national democratic struggle are not two separate struggles. They do not occur in two separate time zones or geographical spaces. Without a deepening socialist orientation, the struggle to defend the popular electoral mandate will be further eroded by ongoing submission to the will of undemocratic ratings agencies, the prophets of austerity, and their local mindless sycophants. Without a deliberate placing of people before profits, the goals of the Freedom Charter and the aspirations so clearly expressed in our democratic 1996 Constitution will forever recede. Without boldly reclaiming socialist values, without instilling popular morality of solidarity, without upholding that profound working class slogan, an injury to one is an injury to all, unless we do this in the face of those who proclaim, I didn't struggle to be poor, who glorify personal primitive accumulation, the continued degeneration of our movement will persist unless we do these things. We are not hitchhikers, as our detractors say. We are not hitchhikers. We are part of the struggle. For 100 years, we've been part of the struggle. And we want to say we've also been part of the victorious forces against the apartheid regime. Because of the struggles, communists have been in the forefront, as we have said, at every turn of our struggle. We are also not entries into the broad democratic movement. Over 100 years, militants of the Communist Party have contributed immensely to building this movement. We will not allow it to continue to decline into deeper degeneration. But we must remind ourselves, the ANC itself, that it does not own the National Democratic Revolution. It must behave as such in order to own it. And the ANC must end. We hear some of our comrades, ANC is leader of society. That's an empty slogan. You have to earn being the leader of society. It's like the Communist Party. We can't just say we are the vanguard of the working class. We must earn being the vanguard of the working class every day on the ground. If we, together with many thousands of incorruptible ANC members and supporters, fail to halt the decline of our movement, it will still be necessary that South Africa has a broad movement like the ANC. That's why we're of the view that South Africa needs the ANC like a dry desert needs water, but an ANC that is free of these regressive and corrupt tendencies. That's why we are saying we are supporting the current leadership of the ANC to cleanse itself, to renew itself. And as communists, we are prepared to work together with our compatriots, socialist or not, in order to drive a national democratic revolution. We are committed to this. We assert that The national democratic revolution, once more, will only be renewed if there is a deepening socialist orientation to its character and in its activities. We are not calling on anybody to do this. This is the tasks of communists in all their sites of operation. We are not left sectarians. We do not decline to work with all democratic, peace-loving, anti-sexist, non-racial patriots, whether they regard themselves as socialists or not. But as our party militants have affirmed over the last 100 years, it is imperative that we roll back the empire of private profit accumulation. Concluding with international solidarity, we want today in our centenary to pledge our solidarity with the people of Swaziland who are struggling for democracy and socialism. The SACP calls for the unconditional release of political prisoners and unbanning of political parties in Swaziland. The time for democracy in Swaziland is now. We pledge our solidarity with the people of Western Sahara and Palestine against the occupation of their land by Morocco and the apartheid Israeli regime, respectively. The SACP reiterates its call for Morocco and Israel to unconditionally end the occupation with immediate effect. The SACP pledges its unwavering solidarity with the people of Cuba and their government against the United States-driven imperialist aggression and regime change machination. The SACP strongly condemns the additional sanctions imposed on Cuba by the United States Joe Biden administration. We call upon all progressives in the United States, even those who are inside the Democratic Party, to end this aggression against the Cuban people. It's a very strange thing. The United States says socialism won't succeed in Cuba, but they make sure that they actually squeeze this country so that it will appear that it's socialism that is not working. This year, for the 29th consecutive time since 1992, the United Nations General Assembly strongly condemned the illegal blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba and called upon the United States to lift the criminal blockade. A total of 184 countries voted in favor of the resolution. And of all countries in the world, only the apartheid Israeli regime stood with the imperialist United States as the minority in this instance. Besides its illegal blockade, the United States is still illegally occupying the Cuban territory of Guantanamo Bay. The United States must unconditionally end both the blockade against Cuba and the occupation of Guantanamo Bay with immediate effect. With these words, we want to say to South African communists, let's soldier on, comrades. Socialism is the future built now. Long live the South African Communist Party. Long live. Long live. We should have also said it's not only our happy birthday, it's also happy centenary to the Communist Party.
Manda, comrades. Manda. Manda, comrades. Yes, we are moving towards the end. As the comrades know, the constraint. We do have a cake that is going to be delivered to the institution for the disabled. But also there are some bit of cupcakes that have been done. If you look at them, they are written 100. It's cupcakes that are there. So in other words, we can have comrades keep picking up only one cupcake each because we cannot do the cutting. And therefore, we're constrained by the COVID practices and trying to keep as safe as is possible. These cupcakes with all the emblems of the Communist Party are done in a form of 100. It's a pity they can't be seen. So welcome, so we would like to. This is our 100 years. Then the comrades can pick up just a cupcake with a serviette, but otherwise the cake will be delivered to the institution for the disabled, as we cannot cut. We want to appreciate that, and thanks comrades. Now, let's just. Okay, comrades, let's get towards the end of our program. Comrades, I need to indicate that the preparations done by the Moses Mabhida in terms of opening up here, and we've seen also the setup was quite a great thing that has made us to celebrate and open our occasion in a proper way. We want to thank you, comrades, for all the work that you have done. Ufasimba lethu here, Comrade Mbe, the national chairperson of the Young Communist League. We want to thank you again for a revolutionary message, a solidarity message that you delivered, which actually reinforces that socialism in our lifetime. You know, so we actually want to thank you again for that, and we want the Young Communist League to lead this socialist revolution as well. In the forefront, we're banking on you, a Young Communist League of South Africa. The first deputy president of COSATU, Comrade Mike, has stayed with us throughout. He's still here. You know, thank you very much, and also emphasizing the issue of the left axis, like it was also emphasized by the General Secretary. You know, that left axis is required more than any other time, as we can see that the workers of our country in the receiving end, particularly during the current times where there was looting, where there is COVID, where there's a lot of job losses. We will continue to strengthen that through this message of solidarity that you have delivered. First Deputy President, thank you very much. We appreciate that very much from COSATU. That will continue to strengthen our relationship, as also indicated by the message. The Communist Party of China, that is always with us, holding our hand. We normally also have the visits in China, where we find a rural area one time. The next time around we go, we wonder where it is because they're able to deal with infrastructure. We've worked with them with a number of other activities, and we believe our relationship, strong and solid, are going to start the next century in a very vigorous way. And we want to thank the Communist Party of China for all the working relationship, the partnership, the work we do together, including the celebration of our 100 years, of the centenary, even the activities that we've been doing leading to our celebration. Thank you, thanks to you very, very much. We appreciate that leadership, and we believe it will be strength to the development of the world, because you already know how to develop the economy. We all have to take that path and ensure that we drive this socialism, because socialism is the only order that can be able to actually change the world. We've realized and seen, we all see how capitalism messes up. Now, the Communist Party of China, I've talked about that. Now, I'm on the Communist Party of Cuba. Communist Party of Cuba has actually played a very critical role in terms of modeling the humanity part in the whole world and showing what socialism is. We have learned a lot from them, and they have actually contributed to the world, the solidarity for the whole world. And therefore, at this point in time, as said by the GS, we will assist them, we will walk them step by step to defeat this imperialist US blockade, to defeat what they're doing to their country. And we have to work together with the people of our country and want every young person to be conscious and understand what does Cuba mean to the world. And we therefore want to thank the comrades who've been working with the Cubans in terms of a number of developments. And the Cubans will never be ravaged while the world is watching, because the world knows what the Cubans have done. We will fight side by side with the Cubans, and we will defeat the imperialists, and we will defeat the approach of capitalism, because that's where we can draw the true meaning and the sense of socialism from Cuba. And we thank the Communist Party, and we thank the message that has been delivered. That includes all the messages from the international community that we have received, that was delivered by our first Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Solima Baila. You have realized that we've got so many messages, we could not read them one by one, but to show that we are existing at an international platform. We sincerely appreciate all the messages, and we want to indicate to the international community, side by side, as the South African Communist Party, we will continue to work, particularly the countries that are driving socialism. Socialism is the future, we definitely have to build it. The African National Congress has delivered also a very powerful message through the National Chair, Comrade Mantashe, and we want to thank that, and then particularly outlining the issues that relate to the economy, and encourage a very encouraging message that outlines that we need to actually drive a number of other areas. Thank you very much, Comrade Mantashe, for leading from the side of the African National Congress. And the last, towards the end, it's that, of course, we have done good work for our 14th Congress Central Committee. You have delivered the statement. We know that the work that has been done in 100 years, it's very difficult to package it within the time you're given. But you've done excellent work, and we want to thank the General Secretary, Dr. Bladen Zemane, for the task, a very heavy task we have given him, which he stood here and actually managed to drive it towards the end. Answer were difficult to summarize, but you have actually captured the gist of the statement. I'm sure the Central Committee is completely happy. I would need to also say thanks to the members of the media who are covering this occasion. We want to thank all people in various platforms, all comrades who joined on YouTube, on Facebook, on TV. We want to thank everyone else. Yes, Central Committee, your centenary has been delivered today. We want to thank the leaders of the Alliance, the international community, and more importantly, and especially the staff of the South African Communist Party, who works under these difficult conditions, but who have made sure that everything else runs so properly. Thanks to all of you comrades who are working in the head office of the Communist Party. Of course, we are at Moses Kotani House, which is not as yet launched. We still have a task with Hope Crew to deal with the work of launching our Moses Kotani building, which is the house housing the South African Communist. But thanks to everybody else. Amanda, happy birthday, SACP, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy born day.
Happy born day, France.
welcome.